The French Revolution. When we talk about the French Revolution, first we remember the words like liberty, equality and fraternity. Nowadays, in every country, every people are asking for having equality, no discrimination, fraternity. So every country is trying to provide to its people the feeling of equality. They assure the freedom is provided to all people, irrespective of their caste, color, creed. So now, when we look into these words of liberty, equality and fraternity, even these three words have a history. The claiming of these words from history gets establishment from the French Revolution. So, the French Revolution, which happened in 1789, inspired many other countries in the coming years to fight for their freedom struggle. So, in this unit, we shall discuss what is the momentum that gave rise for the people to fight against their traditional monarchy. How did people fight? What are the consequences of this? And later, what happened? And what is the true story of the French Revolution? Well, let us begin with an introductory note. The French Revolution, it was on the day of 14th July 1789. The entire state was on alarm. Everybody was terrified. What happened actually on 14th of July 1789? The 14th of July plays a very vital role, not only on the past, but even today. This is observed as a national day in France. So what happened actually on 14th of July? There were rumors which spread that the king has ordered the military to enter into the streets and destroy the people's gathering. And they were also expecting that the king might even order to open fire on the people. On the background, the people actually gathered on that day their protest towards the rise of the price of the bread. The rise of the price of the bread was actually troubling them a lot. Many of them are struggling to get even a piece of bread. That was the situation what the actual people are facing. Ignoring these situations, there were rumors which spread that the king has ordered the army to enter into the streets and then destroy the gathering. If necessary, the king may also order to open fire on these people. So, the news spread like a wildfire. As this news or this rumor spread like a wildfire, people were angered with the words of the king. Being ignorant to the problems of the people and also forcing the people to terrify the people, he ordered the army to destroy them, which means literal words that he do not want to pay any attention towards the problems of the people. This made the people very, very angry. As the people are very, very angry, they all gathered. Nearly 7,000 men and women gathered at a town hall. After gathering at a town hall, the 7,000 men and women, these people have formed their own group of force, popularly known as People's Militia. The People's Militia, having 7,000 force of people, which is comprising of men and women, went to the palace. The palace name is Bastille Palace. The Bastille Palace has been a symbol of royal power, and where those who are talking towards the favor of the people or those who did any agitations against the king are being imprisoned there. there are nearly 7 people imprisoned in this Bastille Palace. People on a mob went there and then they destroyed the palace, they killed the commander, and finally they released all the 7 prisoners who were imprisoned there, and later they destroyed the palace and broke the palace walls into small fragments. People are so much angry that people started to maintain as a symbol of their freedom that a fragment of a stone piece of the Bastille Palace in everyone's house. And people are so crazy, sometimes they even bought the stone fragments in the market. So on the day of 14th July, the people's militia attacked the Bastille Palace and destroyed the Bastille Palace, released the 7 prisoners who are imprisoned inside, and later breaking it into small fragments, sold the small fragments in the market, which made the people to feel very happy at that point of time. So this was a very rare incident which happened ever since in France became a monarchic state. So now the historians started to look at this point from a different perspective. What triggered the people's anger on that day to that much extreme level? What made the people to be so violent? So now, for us to understand this, we need to go in detail what happened on that day. Historians saw this as an outcome of a series of events. So what are the series of events that led for the people to come and blast a palace and break it into pieces? After breaking it, they could not get satisfied. They sold it in the market and people bought it. So we need to understand here, there is something which is very strong feeling for the people, which made the people to feel very bad. That's why that has raised the anger of the people. So let us find out in detail what are the series of the events that happened and resulted on the issue on the day of 14 July 1789 as people have blasted the Bastille Palace. Now, as the historians mentioned that we have a series of events which triggered for this incident. So now let us find out what are the series of the incidents. Let's focus on the French society in the late 18th century. How is the French society? How is it divided? Who is actually ruling the France? Let us find out the details now. France was ruled by Louis XVI. He belongs to Bourbon family and he ascended the throne in 1774. Louis XVI, belonging to a royal family, got ascended to the throne in 1774 and he got married to Austrian Princess Mary Antoinette. So Louis XVI, who came into power, the young king, who was just 20 when he ascended the throne. So after he got married and he ascended the throne, he went to find out what is the status of the treasury. When he opened and found out the facts that the entire treasury was empty, this brought a severe shock for a newly wedded married king. So Louis XVI found a shocking point, that is the treasury was empty. Why the treasury was empty? Later he started to find out the reasons why is the treasury empty. So in his process of understanding why the treasury was empty, he came to know that France has supported the American colonies to fight against the British. So when France has been supporting these 13 colonies to fight against the Britishers. Lot of money has been spent and lot of manpower has been sent there. So this long years of war has drained the economy of France. Finally, it resulted in a continuous credit from the outsiders at a very high rate of interest. So it has crossed $1 billion livres, and now the total loan amount has gone up to 2 billion livres. The 2 billion livres is really a very huge amount, and the creditors, the people those who gave money for the government, started to charge more percent of interest on behalf of the increase of the credit. As the credit has increased, the percentage of the interest also has increased. Now it has been raised to 10%. Now the France economy is completely in trouble. Continuous wars like supporting the American colonies to fight against the Britishers for 7 years, 7 long years, has completely drained the entire wealth of France. And now these creditors who gave the loan amounts are charging very high rate of interest. So finally France has to pay huge amount from its financial transactions in order to pay the interest for these people, and also to run the royal court, to run the government offices, to run the schools, the colleges, the universities, hospitals. All these are still becoming an overburden for the French government at that time. So now there is no other alternative left out other than just to increase the tax on putting the burden on the people directly. So this is a situation in 1774. Let's find out now. Louis, who got married newly to Austrian princess Mary at very young age, and he found that the treasury was completely empty. So in his process of learning what made the treasury to be empty, he learned that 7 continuous years of wars supporting the US colonies to fight against their colonial masters, the continuous and permanent enemy of the France, that is Great Britain, that resulted in huge loan amount for them, and finally it accounted to a total credit amount of 2 billion livres. So this 2 billion livres, the creditors who gave this loan amount started to charge 10% of interest, which is a very high rate of interest at that point of time. So now there is no other alternative other than increasing the taxes and putting the burden on the people in order to maintain the royal court, the government offices, the schools, the hospitals, the universities and everything. So let's find out what happened next. As there is no other alternative left out, they need to increase the taxes because they have tried all the alternative methods, but any of the measures could not suffice the economic crisis in France. So in order to maintain this, they need to increase the taxes on the people. So let us first throw light on how is French society divided. French society is divided into 3 estates. The first comprises of clergy, the first group. The second, the nobility. And the third, it consists of merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, small peasants, and also all the landless laborers. So the entire society has been brought into the bracket of 3 estates, that is the clergy, the officials who work for the church are coming under the umbrella of clergy, the nobles, the feudal lords, they enjoyed the feudal privileges who are closely associated with the monarch, come under the bracket of nobility, and the rest, merchants, court officials, lawyers, peasants, artisans, small peasants, landless laborer, all were brought under the third estate. One of the other significant feature which we need to remember is the first two estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, are exempted from any kind of taxes. This is given as a birth privilege to them as they are born in the higher estates of the society. So, from this it is very clear that the third estate itself gets all the taxes burden and they only have to pay everything, while these people enjoy the privileges on the name of the privileges given by the estates and also enjoy with the money paid by the third estate people. Now, other than this, 60% of the entire cultivatable land is under the control of nobles and the clergy people, while they also enjoyed the feudal privileges. As I mentioned earlier, the nobility has the privileges of feudalship where the landless laborers have to work for the noble lords. Then only they will be respected in the society, and they are forced to work for very less wages or sometimes no wages. And the churches used to collect taxes other than the taxes which are collected by the government, that is the tithe and tiling. Tithe is 1/10 of your produce comprising of agricultural produce, and the tiling is a direct tax collected by the church. Now, the society is divided into three estates, which shows the clear bifurcation of the society, and which categorization itself reveals for us that certain special privileges are given for the first and second estate. Those are clergy and the nobility, and the third estate people are merchants, court officials, lawyers. These all are must to pay the taxes, and it is mandatory for them. They have to pay all the taxes, not only to the government but also to the court officials, and they also have certain special privileges which force the other workers or the landless laborers to work for them freely, and they also have to pay the taxes like tithe, which is 1/10 of your produce, and thili, which is a direct tax collected by the church. So, this is a broad picture of the society of the France at that point of time in the later part of the 18th century. Now, let us see the struggle to survive. What is a struggle to survive? In the French society, we have the population in 1715 is 23 million people, while in 1789 it rose up to 28 million people, which means we can see an increase of 5 million population in a span of 1715 to 1789. So, it is nearly 64 years the population increased 5 million years. With this, automatically the need or the necessity of the food grains also increased. As the population increased, the percentage of the people those who consume them also increased, ultimately resulted in the increase of the food grains. Later, this impact was shown on the cost of the bread being risen. So now food grains cost increased, resulting in the cost of the bread going up. In this time, are the wages not increasing? Yes, wages also increased for the people, those who are working, but this wages could not increase in par with the necessity or par with the requirement. So, the gap between the rich and the poor got widened. As the gap between the rich and the poor got widened, in order to add to this situation further, whenever there is any drought or a hail, that also brought severe trouble for the people, especially the poor people, to face many problems, because this reduced the production. The droughts or the hail destroyed the production which is actually in shortage when required to the population requirement, and still when this added for that, this resulted in the subsistence crisis. What is subsistence crisis? The subsistence crisis is a situation where the basic needs of the people are endangered, especially food, clothing and shelter are in trouble. Those kind of situations are named as subsistence crisis. So now in France in 1715 the population is 23 million. It rose up to 28 million in 1789, and this raises the requirement of the food grains and also resulting in the cost of the bread going up. With this, the wages are also increased, but not in par with the requirement or the times allotment of the situation, because when the price of the bread is increasing so much, the wages were not increasing so much. And then droughts and hails also added to make the situations worst, because they destroy the production, they reduce the production capability of the field, and this ultimately resulted in the subsistence crisis. Subsistence crisis means a situation where the basic needs of the people are endangered, and this endangered situation is known as subsistence crisis. Now let us look at the growing middle class. The growing middle class came up with a point that the special privileges which are given to estate 1 and the estate 2, that is the clergy and the nobles, have to be waived off. What made the third estate to come up with this point? Let's find out the details. The revolts in the initial years, where the third estate people were burdened with all types of taxes. So whenever there is an increase in the taxation or whenever there is food scarcity, the third estate people always tried to raise up their voices to make the rulers to understand that they are facing so many problems, but they could not succeed in their attempts. So that point has been left out for the prosperous third estate people who came or who emerged in the later part of the 18th century. Actually, the third estate comprises of merchants, administrative officials like lawyers, clerks, and all the other court officials, all come under the category of the third estate people. The merchants started to do trade not only within the country, but they also started to do overseas trade. With this overseas trade, they started to earn huge profits. And as officials of the courts and all the other administrative position people fall under the category of third estate, where all the educated people are present. So the educated people started to question why there is a special privilege given to the people on the basis of their birth. There is no book which claims that they should have special privileges basing on their birth. So why are the special privileges given to these particular people? So these questions started to be raised up on a very higher note. And later we also look at the books written by John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. John Locke, in his book Two Treatises of Government, clearly mentions that there are no special privileges given to any of them basing on their birth, and also Jean-Jacques Rousseau similarly mentions that there is a general agreement between the people but not any power and the people. So the power rests with the people and not with the king or the monarchy. So people are the original power holders, not the power sufferers. So he also raises the point, and later in USA we can see the theory which was put into practice or force, theory of separation of powers ideology given by Montesquieu in the Spirit of Laws of his book. So now The France people also want a clarity on what are the rights that a king holds. Are they judicial rights? Are they administrative rights? Are they political rights? They also need a clear separation on the holding of the powers, and why are not people involved, and why there are special privileges given to the people on the basis of the birth. These all were the important topics which are deliberately discussed at the saloon shops, coffee shops, and various other places. As most of the people are uneducated people, the people, those who know to read and write, started to read the books aloud so that the neighboring uneducated people also can understand what is a theme or what is a book about and how to understand the policies. So all these made France aware, and this is a situation where the people started to discuss that it's not basis on the birth that special privileges have to be given. It is basis on the talent, and the prosperous people of the third estate started to question what is the difference between the noble clergy and the third estate people. Why there is a differentiation, and why only the third estate people are forced to pay taxes and not the clergy and the nobles. Larger part of the land is still today under the control of the clergy and the nobles. So how can the country progress? And why are these special privileges given on the basis of the birth? These are the important discussions everywhere in the corner of France and at the center of the capital. So now the understanding of the people started to increase. Now the people are suffering with many economic problems. During this time, Louis XVI came up with an idea to increase taxes in order to maintain the royal court, in order to run the government, in order to maintain the special privileges and the extravagant court, which triggered the anger of the people, where they started to consider that this king is the main reason for us to have these many problems, who is not actually looking at the solution of the problems, but increasing our problems. Now, the outbreak of the revolt, as we discussed in the introduction of the lesson, the people have did some terrific action. What was that action sequence we discussed in detail. Now, let us see step by step. We saw how is the society during that period and what is subsistence crisis. Subsistence crisis has always been in France. Now, the situation was, from the king's point of view, there is no other alternative left out other than doing taxation. So we need to increase the taxes. That's the only way in order to maintain the credit balance or in order to have the treasury full in France. So the kings cannot increase the taxes as per their will and wish. They have to assemble the estates general, and then they have to take voting which approves the taxation, and then it becomes a formal taxation procedure completes. Then they go ahead and pay the taxes. So now the estates general was asked to gather, which gathered in 1614 for the last time, and after nearly 175 years, it was called on 5th of May 1789 to pass the proposals of taxation. So as the estate general rules dictates that every estate will have representatives gathering, and then they discuss on this issue, they go for voting, and then they finalize the proposal of taxation. So the three estates are being invited. The resplendid hall at the town of Versailles became a venue for these people. It welcomed all the delegates. 300 delegates from estate 1, 300 delegates from estate 2 are sitting right opposite to each other, while the third estate people are having 600 representatives who are standing at the back of the first estate as well as the second estate. only the well-educated, elite group people of the third estate are allowed inside. The small peasants, the workers, the women, the children are denied entry into the hall at that time. So they all wrote their problems, their request in the form of letters, and these 600 representatives are catching those letters, which accounted nearly for 40,000 letters in their hands. So all the three estates got gathered, and king came up with the proposal of increasing the taxation. But as people started to read the books which are having social awareness, and according to the book written by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his book Social Contract, he mentions rightly that the general will of the people has to be taken into consideration by giving equal value for all of them. But as per the traditions of estate general, every estate, it may be the first estate, second estate, or the third estate, will have the right to vote for only one vote per estate. So now the third estate people want to have more number of votes in order to get their voting approved in the estate general hall. But the king decided to go up with the old practice. As the king decided to go up with the old practice, the third estate people are very unhappy and dissatisfied with the king's decision, and they started to move out of the town hall. They moved away from the estate general's meeting on that day. So this happened in the estate general hall. King ordered for the meeting after nearly 175 years. On the 5th of May 1789, all gathered. Each estate has sent their representatives, like first estate 300 people, second estate 300 people, sitting right opposite to each other, and behind these people we have the third estate people. Third estate people are a total of 600 representatives who are having 40,000 letters given by the people, those who are denied entry into the hall, giving their requisitions and their problems in the form of letters. When the king appealed to go with the old tradition of single estate, single vote custom, the third representatives or third estate representatives started to raise up the slogans as per the social contract book written by Rousseau, that everyone has to be given equal right to vote so that their voting can be approved bilaterally. But the king, who decided to go ahead with the old practice, did not agree and decided that we will give only one estate, one vote. So this made the people of the third estate to feel very much annoyed, sad and depressed, and with angry with the decision of the king, they left the hall and moved outside. Now, the outbreak of the revolt, we discussed that all have been ordered to gather in the estates general. So the three estates have sent their representatives. The king decided to go with the old tradition, for giving each estate one vote. Now, as there is no choice left out, in order to protest the decision of the king, the third estate people moved out of the assembly hall, and they gathered on 20th of June 1789 in the indoor tennis court, as they assumed that they are the true representatives of the France nation, and they decided that they will draft a constitution which will definitely limit the powers of the king, especially the monarch, and constitution will be the supreme, and people will have the authority to decide what is right and what is wrong. So in this intention, the people, those who drove the third estate people on this large gathering, were two people, Mirabeau and Abysseus. Mirabeau is basically belonging to a noble family, but still he has the idea and the views that this special privileges has to be waived off from our families, and he gave many speeches inspiring people about the thoughts and his ideology. And we also have Abysseus. Abysseus is basically a priest, and he wrote many pamphlets encouraging the people to know what is the third estate. The real true face of France is the third estate. The third estate comprises of 90% of the entire population of the France. So these motivated words of Mirabeau and Abysseus made the people to gather on 20th of June 1789, and they decided that they would not come out of the tennis court until they finish drafting of the constitution, which will definitely restrict the authorities of the king. And later, when the people or third estate representatives are very busy in drafting the constitution, the villages and the people were struck with the severe bad weather conditions, and the severe situations made the people on 14th of July to come and blast the Bastille Palace. After the Bastille Palace has been blasted and it was broken into small fragments, and these fragments were sold in the market, the rumors were also spread that in the villages the lord of the manor is the representative of the king, who collects the taxes from the village people, and he lives at a place called Chetiox, the official residence of a manor, where we have the hoarded grains and also the documents where every villager has to pay the amount, the details, everything will be kept there. So they heard a message or a rumor that the lord of Manor has taken help from the king and brought brigands who are coming to destroy the crop which is on rice and then torture the people. So the angered people took the hoes and the sickles, and then pitchforks, went in a mass gathering to destroy the Chetiox, and they completely destroyed the Chetiox, grabbed the hoarded grains and burnt the manorial documents completely. And after destroying them, they forced the manors to leave away their homes, and they occupied that manors, which resulted that many of the manors left the country. Many of them took shelter in various other neighboring countries. So the moment when the situations are going on, they became from severe to worst, and then now the entire France was angry with the ideology of the king. The idea of putting taxes on the third estate, which is actually a burden to them. Even the king knew the point, because the first and the second estate people do not pay any tax because they are exempted from the taxation, while the third estate people, who are really facing lot of problems because of severe bad weather, because of poverty, there is a lot of situation where the people could not even buy a piece of bread. Instead of helping the poor people, the king is planning to increase the taxes on the third estate people. This concept, these special privileges raised the anger of the third estate people, resulting in blasting the Bastille Palace and also clearing the Chatillon palaces or the official residence of the manors, and made it completely clear that the anger of the people has been shown in action to the king. So finally the constitution was drafted, and king, after looking at the reactions of the people becoming so violent, and was not left out with any other option other than accepting the constitution, agreed that constitution is supreme than him on 4th of August 1789. So with this, France becomes a constitutional set up. So what did they decide? Did really king accept or any other conspiracies behind this? Let's find out. Now, the constitutional monarchy. France turns to be a constitutional monarchic state. It was looking at the actions of the people which are very, very violent. We have seen the people in the villages have attacked the castles of the manors, destroyed them, burnt the manorial documents, and forced the manors to leave the country. And at times they also killed. So now, looking at the violent reaction of the people, the king decided to be a constitutional monarch and agree that constitution will be supreme above him. This happened on the night of 4th August 1789. The constituent body which got established decided that they give up all the special privileges for the clergy and the nobles, and they also confiscated all the lands which are under the control of the church, which are under the control of the clergy, which are under the control of the nobles, all together accounted for the government to get an assets worth of 2 billion livres. So now the government is not at all still in a position to pay any interest because they have lot of money, they can clear all the debts, and they are in the positive side. So now they are in the positive side. So finally the drafting of the constitution completed by 1791. The drafting of the constitution, after completing thoroughly by 1791, they brought, instead of vesting the powers, the entire powers in a single person, we would divide the powers by establishing certain institutions. What are those institutions? Those are legislative, executive, and judicial. They established the institutions of legislative, executive, and judiciary by dividing the works and making the king just a constitutional monarch. They had a national assembly comprising of 745 members which will formulate the laws for the nation, and they have executive body to implement the laws and the judiciary to check and provide justice to the citizens of France. After establishing this one, they also brought the voting system. In making the voting system, they gave voting rights only to men, and women are brought into the passive voters. Men are brought into the active voters, and the men who are above 25 years of age and who pay at least 3 days amount of a daily labor or 3 days wage of a daily labor as a tax to the government are eligible to be the voters, which means the high bracket taxpayers only are eligible to vote. So again we can see a division in the voters. Passive voters, poor voters, those who are economically poor cannot be voters anymore, because as per the new law you should be in the bracket of high taxpayers, then only you are eligible to vote. So the changes from the constitutional form to the latest monarchic state to the constitutional monarchy. On 4th of August 1789, king agreed to be a constitutional monarch. The government lands, so church lands, the nobles lands, all together were brought under one hand. After confiscation, they got the assets worth of 2 billion livres, which made the government position to be stable without falling into any economic crisis. And next, we have the division of powers from the hand of the king to the legislative, executive, and judiciary. After the division of the power happened, they have the voting rights given to the people basing on their age, and on the bracket of taxpayers they brought certain criteria to make a person eligible for voting, and women are completely denied the voting rights, and they were brought under the category of passive voters. The constitution also begins with the declaration that right to freedom, right to speech, right to equality, right of expression as the natural inalienable rights. So the natural inalienable rights are the rights which are given by birth. A person who is born in France gets the natural rights to talk, to speak, to express his opinions. In the similar way, the freedom to do whatever he wants. So these are considered as inalienable rights according to the new constitution of France, which are granted to all the people of France, all the citizens of France, whether they are active citizens or passive citizens. It is the responsibility of the government to make sure that the rights are not denied to any of its citizens in the country. So the new constitution has brought in certain new laws. The rights to freedom, equality and fraternity got the inspiration from the constitutional framework of the France, which got a clear picture, and this has been clearly shown in the declaration of the France Constitution in 1791. So now, for namesake, we have a monarchy which has very limited powers when compared to the previous times. The entire authority rests with the people through their national assemblies. Legislative, executive and judiciary work for the people by the elected representatives, and every person is being given natural rights which are inalienable and which are not at all being able to be denied by any government or any other body. So that is the responsibility of the government to make sure that these people are being given these particular rights and nobody takes away these people's basic rights. That is the main theme of the constitution, or the main declaration of the French constitution, which motivated many millions of people across Europe and across the globe to fight for the freedom. France now abolishes monarchy and turns to be republic. Till that moment, France made the monarch to be a constitutional monarch. King Louis XVI entered into a secret agreement with the king of Prussia, because the Prussian and the Austrian kings are worried against the developments which are happening in the neighboring state of France. So with their support, he wanted to recapture the political power into his hands. Getting the knowledge of this, the Parliament, the National Assembly of France, voted in summer 1792 to fight a war against Prussia and Austria. Why they decided to fight a war? Because the king is secretly getting support from the Prussians and the Austrians. Here, the people thronged into the war from the provinces, from the villages, from every corner of the country. Men run away and joined the war. Why? Why did the people ran like that to join in the war? Here, they started to feel it is as their basic concern to save their nation. It is their own nation, and it is considered as a war between the kingship and all the common people against all aristocratic families which are present in Europe are considered to be the targeted of this war. That is the reason why from every corner of France, even in a far off village, we have people coming forward and joining in the war. So now when men are in the task of war, they always sung a song which was written by Robert D. Elsie. Robert D. Elsie wrote a song known as Marseillaise. Marseillaise became very famous because it was first sung in the Bastille Palace momentum, where people gathered and started singing the song and moving ahead. So later, today now, Marseillaise is a national anthem of France. So the national song of France. So Marseillaise has been a motivating song for many millions of people in France. So now men ready and joined the wars. Now women are left out with the tasks of fulfilling the daily needs of the household. Women has to earn, women has to take care of the families, women has to look after the daily works which are impending, like getting water, fetching water, or cleaning the utensils, working in the laundry shops as laundresses, working in the pastry shops, working in the bakery shops, working in the coffee shops. All these have become a tasks of the women because they are the main responsible people at home at present. Looking at the growing dissatisfaction of the people, people started to discuss these issues by forming certain clubs. These clubs are named as Saint Jacobin clubs. The Saint Jacobin clubs are the names of the convents which were present during that time. The Jacobin clubs were very famous at that point of time. And why people are dissatisfied even with the constitutional setup at that time? People are dissatisfied with the constitutional setup because there is no true voting right given to the people. Yes, king was brought under the bracket of constitutional powers, but in practicality, only the rich people who come under the category of high taxpayers only are eligible to vote, which means maybe they 10% of the people of France are also may not be eligible truly to vote. So the rest of the 90% are left out. So this is a very pathetic situation for the people of France. That is another reason why people continued to be in the wars and discuss their issues actively in the Jacobin clubs. It's not only the point of view of the men. Many of the women also actively participated and discussed the social and the political happenings in the nation. Everything has been discussed thoroughly, and many of the people of the Jacobin clubs decided to put long stripped trousers to mark as an end of the knee breeches rule. The long stripped trousers people are also known as sans-culottes people, and here it is very clear for us that the rule of the nobles, the rule of the rich, the rule of the clergy, the rule of the kingship has to come to an end, and the common man's rule has to flourish. This was the main aim of the discussions of the Jacobin clubs. This also motivated people to go and fight in the wars, which motivated the women to be very strong when men are at war. They took up various tasks to fulfill the daily requirements of their families as being the head of the family when the real head is at the task of the war. So the Jacobin clubs played a very vital role at that point of time. Now, as the rule of the monarchy was fluctuating in France, the Jacobin clubs became a widespread movement. The people are completely dissatisfied with the rule of the existing system of the constitutional monarchy. That's why people themselves dressed in the knee breeches, where they want to put an end to the knee breeches rule. So they dress themselves in the sans-culottes code, which means the full stripped trouser dresses, and they also put on red cap as a symbol of liberty for them, as a symbol of freedom for them. But in actual terms, they do not have this all in really, because the king was still doing some secret agreements with them. That is the reason why the war began. Now, after that, in 1792, the Jacobins decided to take a severe protest against the shortage of the food supplies for the people. So, on 10th of August 1792, at the Palace of Tuileries, The Tuileries Palace was the actual palace where the king resides. So the king stays at the palace of Tuileries, where the people gathered as a mass entered into the palace, massacred the king's guards, and kept king as a hostage. This was a fantastic step taken by the people under the influence of the Jacobin clubs. And they also decided that the king would be kept in hostage, and when the voting happened, they decided to kill the king as per the rules, because king was being kept under the action of treason of the kingdom, where he acted very unlawfully towards them, very problematic to them. Later, they also remodified all the laws. The special convention which came into power after the end of the kingship rule, now monarchy came to end legally in France. So now we got the establishment of the Republican government in France. So the Republican government first step it has taken that every individual who is aged above 21 years of age, irrespective of his economical status, will get the right to vote. That is made clear by the convention which came to power in September 1792. The newly elected government, that is known as convention, which came into force from 21st September 1792, brought and declared that France to be republic. Republic needs two basic conditions. One, it should have a written constitution. Two, it should not have any hereditary ruler. So from now, the monarchy is completely banned and wiped out of the ruling of France. They already had a written constitution, and now they can elect a hereditary, non-hereditary ruler. So obviously, from now, France turns to be a republican country. After being republican, the king, the ex-king of France, Louis XVI, under the charges of treason, was being publicly hanged to death. That happened on 21st of Jan 1793 at the palace of de la Concorde. Even the Queen Marie Antoinette also met the same fate very close, just a month later. So with this, the monarchy turned to be a constitutional monarch. After turning into a constitutional monarch, now France turns to be a republican country and finishing off the king's family completely. Now the rule of the convention under the leadership of Robespierre's Maximilian starts up. So what happened? Why is the rule of Robespierre Maximilian popularly known as the Reign of Terror? Reign of Terror. Robespierre Maximilian was a leader who was elected by the convention or the newly formed republican government headed by Robespierre Maximilian. This person's name is remembered as a terrified name in the history of France. He ruled just for 1 year, 1793 to 1794, but still he has achieved a brand of changes. What are the changes that he brought and why people are so scared and his own supporters could not bear his rules and regulations? So what did he do actually, and what made his own supporters not to support him? Let's find out. Robespierre Maximilian came to power in 1793 and he was in power only for 1 year, that is up to 1794. So he had a severe control on the rules and regulations, and even the punishments were very severe. He wanted to streamline everything. In his speeches, when he made in the convention parliament hall, he always mentioned that in order to have freedom, we need to end the enemies of them. Otherwise, we will be perished. So in his intention, he want to weed out all the enemies, wash away all the enemies which would trouble the people in future and stop the freedom of the people in future. So you want to clear all those and make the people to have complete freedom in the long run of the future. So he want to be very strict in washing away the unnecessary issues what are present at that time. So in this process of washing away the things, he brought certain new policies. What are those? If he considers anyone as the enemies, in the word of enemies, he need to describe that he considers the people as enemies who are against the republican ideology, who are in the pro-kingship policy, pro-democratic methods, or pro any other methods which are against the republican ideology of the France. He arrested them, he imprisoned them, and they were tried by the courts, the revolutionary courts. If the court found them as guilty, immediately they would be sent to guillotine. Guillotine is the name of a machine which was designed by Dr. Guillotine. Dr. Guillotine described a two-poled machine which has one blade which beheads the person's head from his body, which means literally killing a person using a machine. This is known as guillotine machine after the name of the inventor Dr. Guillotine. And whoever is sent to this guillotine will be guillotinized, means killed. If the punishments are very severe, if they do not follow the rules, they are liable for the punishments. And he also brought certain major changes like sealing the wages and prices of the products. He brought all the wages on a streamlined procedure, and he brought them at a single cap. Everybody must and should pay certain amount of wages for the workers, and the market prices will not increase as per the wish or the whims of the people in the market. That will be dictated by the government. So market prices are maintained at the reachable cost of the common people. It was a very fantastic step taken by Robespierre. And then meat and bread are rationed. Meat and bread are made available to the people even at very low cost and at the reach of the people. And if any farmer tries to sell his product outside the market, he will be punished severely. Government will fix the price of the crop, and people are forced to sell their crop to the market at the fixed price of the government, and no extra charges shall be laid on that, and no extra profits will be given. And later he also want to bring utmost equality completely. He want to eradicate the discrimination of madam and sir. He want all of them to have the citizenship rights irrespective of any discriminations. So he want to streamline the society on the guidelines of equality, market to be controlled by the government to make it reachable to the people and at the cost which can be afforded by the poor people of the society at that point of time in France. So yes, his policies are extremely very well and very good, which are well connected to the poor people, very well connected to the needy people. And he want to make equality in the true justice by bringing no discrimination on the people's side, not even calling the people with a special respect, call all of them as citizens. So now this was brought with an iron hand, very strict rules, very strict implementations, very severe punishments. By mistake or by chance, if you talk anything against the views of Robespierre, you will be imprisoned, you will be arrested, and you will be taken to the court, the revolutionary court, where sometimes you may be sent to the guillotine also as a punishment. So this much of extreme severe phase made his own supporters to feel that we need modernization, we need to be little bit soft when we are dealing with the people, we need to be modern in the sense we do not take decisions in a hurry, we need some time, we do not want such a severe punishments for anybody. we want to be soft in nature and make the people to understand what are the problems. In July 1794, Robespierre's Maximilian was tried by the court, the revolutionary court, and on the very next day, he was sent to the guillotine. And there ends the story of Robespierre's Maximilian, a great person who dreamed to have a society on the basis of true equality, who brought the ceiling of the wages, who rationed the meat and wheat, the available cost of the people. But still, the way it was implemented was really very harsh and very tough, where the people could not bear it much more than just 1 year. And this brought the end of a great rule of Robespierre's Maximilian, who tried his level best to make the society to get into the true equality lines by removing of all the discriminations. Yes, Robespierre's rule was really harsh and he gave severe punishments. Maybe that is the point which was a serious drawback for his rule. Other than that, he was really a social reformer in the society of France. That's the reason why rightly it is known as the reign of terror, the rule of Robespierre Maximilian. Now, the directory rule over France. We have seen the Robespierre Maximilian rule. People were suffering a lot because of his severe punishments. So people decided to go for the other set of rules. With the fall of Robespierre's Jacobin government falling down, the wealthy middle class came to power in France. So now the power is in the hands of the wealthy middle class people. They have drafted a new constitution. They have brought new changes in the existing constitution. That is, the voting rights were denied to the non-propertied people, which means only the rich and the privileged people who can own some properties, who are paying certain amount as tax, only are eligible to vote, which actually was contrary as per the laws made by Jacobin. That's why they changed the constitution. And later we have elected council. So the elected council decided that we would not have any one person's rule again, like what we have experienced in the Robespierre Maximilian case. So they decided to have two branches, that is elected councils. In that they will have directory group, executive group. Each group will have again 5 representatives, not at all in one person's hand. They will have 5 representatives, and most of the times the directory and the executive were always in clash with each other. They never used to agree or go hand in hand with each other. They always used to take the opposite sides and used to fight. This created a lot of political instability in the country. And this political instability paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. So now, Napoleon Bonaparte declared himself as the ruler of France. This clearly shows for us that France, which was under the monarchic rule under Louis XVI, got converted into constitutional monarchy. Again from constitutional monarchy, it turned into complete republican state. From the republican state, it became into a directory rule, and finally it moves back to the situation of monarchic rule. Though it came back to the same old system of ruling, the ideals of liberty, fraternity, and the brotherhood relationships and the equality principle did not leave inspiring the people in various parts of Europe and all over the globe. So now let's find out what was the role of the woman and what did Napoleon do. At the end we shall discuss. We shall now find out what is the role of the women in the French Revolution. How did they contribute? And what are they, active or passive? We will find out. What was the role of women in the revolution? That we shall find out now. Let us see here. Women has to play many roles in the society, even in France also. Let us see, why did women work actually? When we were discussing about the issue of war, when the National Assembly decided to wage war against Austria and Prussia, many men thronged into the war from every corner of France. So the main responsibility came at the hand of women at that point of time. And even always women participated in the French Revolution. It may be in the first phase, in the Bastille Palace incident, or it may be in the Palace of Tuileries, or it may be in any of the Robespierre Maximilian or the Jacobin clubs. Whatever may be the reason, French always people thought that women also should participate in the revolutionary so that we can pressurize the king, the government, the system. Then only the pressure can be felt. So in the similar lines, we can see that women has taken the responsibility of working for living to run the family. So in running the family, what are the jobs that she has taken up? The jobs mainly she has taken up are working as a laundress, working in a laundry shop, sold flowers. Later, she worked as a domestic servant, selling fruits and also selling vegetables. Not just working, she also did many other household activities. Some of them are maintaining the family, fetching water, maintaining or looking after or taking care for the children. Cooking is a major responsibility, and queue up in the bread and finally attain bread for the children at the house. So women first worked to get some money to run the family, like laundresses, fruit seller or flower seller, or even she worked as a domestic servant, and later she also has taken care of the family by fetching water, queuing up for the bread, and then taking care of the children, cooking for the children. And these all are the responsibilities or the duties which are carried out by a woman even in France. Only a few section of people who are wealthy, rich and the noble family people only are exposed to get education. So the other third estate generation people or the third estate group of people do not have access to education or no proper training to do any of the below category of jobs. So the situation of the woman was really tragic at that point of time, but still she never gave up. They had many revolutionary clubs to have equal passionate to participate in the political developments of the country. They want the political freedom equally with men. So there are nearly 60 clubs where women participated, and they also were completely dissatisfied when Robespierre Maximilian brought certain new changes. The revolutionary government brought revolutionary changes, but still they did not acknowledge or provide right to vote for women. They completely dissatisfied women. Yes, they brought certain new laws to change the lives of women. They brought compulsory education for girls. They have made divorce legal. They should not pressurize any girl to marry without the will or the consent of the girl. So these all are certain new laws which made the lives of the women much better. But still they were not given the right to vote equally with men. Women fought even during the time of reign of terror. Their ultimate goal was to have equality in right to vote. They want the right to vote equally with men. They want to have the right to vote in determining the future of the nation. So they fought like this continuously for more than 200 years. And many countries, these issues were broken up, and in many countries women fought against the existing systems to attain equality. Finally, in 1946, in France, the right to vote is given equally for men and women. With this, the large struggles of women for equality for 200 years came to an end. So women played very active role in the French Revolution, after the French Revolution, the further consequences, and they also fought for their right to equality by attaining right to vote in 1946. Many of the women, though they do not belong to the first or the second estate families, they belong to the third estate families where they are very poor. They have to work as laundresses, fruit sellers, vegetable sellers, flower sellers, or sometimes as domestic maids. But still they have to take care of their own families. They have to take care of the children. They have to cook for the children. They have to stand in the queues for water. They have to stand in the bakery queues to get bread. They perform all these things when men are at war, preserving or serving for the nation. They, from their point of view, also contributed a large to build the nation. But they were completely dissatisfied when the revolutionary government of Robespierre did not acknowledge the right to vote for women in 1791. They were completely dissatisfied with this statement, and later, though the revolutionary government brought certain steps which made the lives better for the women, women were given the right to vote for education, no right to vote, but given the right to read or educated, right to train for small jobs, and also no force in regards to marriage, and we also have divorce made to be legal with the consent of the girl. So all these things made their lives better, but they want the political equality, the right to vote equally with men, which they were able to achieve by forming different revolutionary organizations and associations in the name of the clubs. They have nearly 60 clubs, and they fought nearly for more than 200 years. Even in the most terror period, they were in struggle with the existing system for right to equality and right to vote. And finally in 1946, they were able to achieve their long awaited dream of right to vote equally with men, and the 200 years long struggle came to an end in 1946. So women had a very vital role what they have played in the French Revolution, and also finally they achieved their targets in a long awaited struggle. Abolition of slavery. The abolition of slavery was not very easy in France. It took nearly 100 to 150 years for them to abolish slavery. First of all, what is the need of a slave for the French people? Actually, the French people never needed for themselves any slaves. They used to buy the Negroes from the local chiefs. They used to go all along way to the Africa, and after reaching Africa, the famous ports like Nantes and Bordeaux, after reaching there, they used to consult the local chief leader, and they used to buy the slaves from them by giving him some gifts, and later they used to pack them and bind their hands, buckle up their hands, and the conditions were very horrible and severe, and whoever is alive only will survive till the last. If anyone dies in the middle because of suffocation or because of any health issues, they will be thrown in the middle in the sea or in the ocean. How pathetic the situation is. And like this, the slaves or the Negroes of Africa are being deported to America to work in the fields, to give a great economic gain for the American landlords. So the people traveled from Europe to Africa, from Africa to America. So this triangular slave trade continued for more than a century, and many of the Africans branded as Negroes were taken away from their homelands to far off distant places and forced to work on very hardship situations. So some of the famous places where in America they used to take, the places are Saint Domingo, Martinique, and Guadeloupe are some of the stations where they were being the home places for the Negroes who migrated from Africa, and they were brought to United States of America. So finally in 1794, after continuous thorough deliberations and serious discussions, the existing directory rule has given free slaves and they banned slave trade. But after 10 years, Napoleon, who declared himself as the monarch of France, reintroduced slavery in 1804. From 1804 till 1848, the slavery continued, and finally in 1848, the slavery was completely banned in France. So like this, slavery came to an end in France. Slavery means bringing the Negroes or the dark colored people from Africa. They were forced to work in the fields of the rich people in United States, and then they were not given any kind of payment for that. So they have to work at very less wage or no wage. This bondage of working is called as slavery without any rights, and this was encouraged by the African countries because the local chiefs used to sell off their own tribal people at very less cost. The European people used to buy them and then export them to the United States of America in very suffocating situations in the ships, which are filled with 300 to 400 people in a single room, and very hard time for them to spend on the boat. And later they used to go to the countries like Saint Domingo, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and the famous ports from where the slaves are being exported are Nantes and Bordeaux. Finally in 1794, the directory rule has given free trade and no slaves further. They have given freedom for the slaves. But in 1804, Napoleon reintroduced the slavery concept because he wanted more number of slaves to justify his rule and to gain larger economic interest by making them to work in their fields. And later in 1848, the slavery was completely banned. With this, abolition of slavery happened in France in 1848. Now, the revolutionary changes which have occurred in every day-to-day life of the French people. We shall have a brief synopsis of what are the major changes that have been brought and what is the differentiation before and after the revolution. When we take in the large lines, we can say that the changes which are brought in law after 1789, the changes were incorporated is the following of liberty and equality into practice by the law. So the law has been made to get liberty and equality into really practice in every day-to-day life of the people of France. That was a major achievement of the people after the 1789 revolt which happened during that time. And later, the freedom of speech, the natural rights, when the freedom of speech was actually being curbed when the king's rule was present, there was a strict censorship on the writings of the people, on the publications. So once they are approved by the royal family members only, that can be printed. But in actual terms here, when it was being placed under the natural rights, which are inalienable rights, where nobody can deny these rights to the people by the government, so people can express their views freely, openly against the government also. But now the difference after and before the revolution is, before the revolution everything should be in pleasing manner to the kings, not even a single word against the king. But afterwards we have newspapers, pamphlets, books, poems, poetries, songs flooding to the people of France from every corner, making the people to aware of the present happening situations so that they can understand it very clearly. It's not only confined to the educated section of people. It's not only associated with the educated section of people like reading books, reading newspapers, magazines, etc. It was also written in the form of folk songs, traditional songs, where even the uneducated people also can understand what is actually happening at that point of time. So it not only broke the barriers but also connected the larger group of the France. So there was a clear variation of life before and after the revolution. In 1804, the Napoleon took over the charge as a monarch of France, which brought many people saw Napoleon as a modernizer of Europe in the initial days. He brought many changes. He brought the uniform system of weights and scales. He was actually considered as a modernizer for the Europe at that point of time. But later, when we observe, Napoleon army is invading every corner of Europe. He want to redraw the map of Europe, which again became problematic to all the other countries and including France. So again there was a division on the Napoleon's rule in the France itself. Some people started to favor the rule, some people started to question the actions of the Napoleon. So finally, after 4 battles were waged, in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon lost the battle. With this, the rule of Napoleon comes to an end. Napoleon, who raised from a status of a normal soldier in an army to a position of a military commander, from then taking over to be the dictator of France. His rose level inspired many people not only in France but across the world. His spirits of high intentions have always, even today, been an inspiring story for many millions of people across the centuries from 18th century to the present 21st century. That's all we have in this lesson. In this lesson of French Revolution, we have covered all the aspects related to the reasons for the Bastille Palace incident, what are the conditions of the society at that point of time, what are the divisions in the society, what were the steps taken by the king which triggered the anger of the people, and later we also have seen the next consequences of revolution and the rule of Robespierre Maximilian, rightly known as Reign of Terror, and then the Directory rule, and finally the rising up of military dictator to the power Napoleon. With this we come to the end of political structural changes in France. We also have focused our attention on the women's role and the abolition of slavery. So with this we get the complete picture on France and the growth and the changes in the political structures of France. So I hope you all understood all the points clearly.